You think you're tough, old man? Lace up. The bucket's heavy, son. Watch where you step. Did everybody hear that? The mop jockey wants to give me advice. I give the floor advice. It listens better. Nolan Prescott laughed so hard, his mouthguard almost fell out, never once suspecting. The janitor he'd just shoved into the ropes had wrapped the hands of 3 national champions. Have you ever watched someone laugh at a person who could take them apart and chosen quietly to say nothing? 4:45 in the morning, Calgary, Alberta. The parking lot of Apex Boxing Club sat empty under a sky the color of wet slate. Hector Dufresne unlocked the service entrance, the same way he had for 11 years, one shoulder leaning into the steel door, key turning with a sound only he would recognize. He filled his bucket from the utility sink, measuring the soap by feel, the way a pharmacist counts pills. Then he mopped the gym floor in long, even passes that never overlapped, starting from the far corner beneath the championship banners and working backward toward the door so his shoes never touched what he'd already cleaned. Most people push a mop. Hector read a floor. Every scuff mark told him who'd been dragging a back foot, who'd been pivoting flat instead of on the ball, who'd been leaning left to protect a cracked rib they hadn't told the trainer about. He knew the rhythms of this gym the way a conductor knows an orchestra, by the sounds it makes when it thinks nobody is listening. He was 67, lean and straight-backed, with close-cropped gray hair and hands that looked like they'd been carved from birch root. He moved deliberately but never awkwardly. Watch him long enough and odd details surfaced. He never stood with even weight on both feet. He folded his cleaning rags into precise squares, corners aligned like envelopes. One morning a heavy bag slipped its chain and swung toward a teenager's spine, and Hector caught the leather with one open palm before the kid even flinched. The head trainer blinked. "Good reflexes for a janitor," he said. Hector only nodded. Reflexes was a word he let other people use. Home was a narrow clapboard house on a back street in Bowness, paid off and quiet. Inside, the shelves held the furniture of an invisible life. A photograph lay face down on the bookcase, dusted weekly, never lifted. In the hall closet sat a leather satchel with a brass clasp, old and soft as a hymnal cover. The clasp had a tiny combination lock, 3 digits. Hector knew them the way he knew his own pulse, but he had not opened that satchel in 16 years. Some nights he sat with it across his knees in the dark living room, turning the dials without aligning them, just feeling the clicks. He never opened it. He just listened to the furnace breathe and waited for morning. Nolan Prescott trained at Apex like the building owed him a standing ovation. 25 years old, undefeated in 16 amateur bouts, with a left hook that sounded like a car door slamming and a highlight reel he watched more often than film of his opponents. The talent was real. That was the trouble. Talent without humility is a river with no banks, fast and destructive and absolutely certain of its direction. His jab snapped pads like a ruler on a desk. After every combination, his eyes drifted to the mirror. Members orbited him. A supplement company stitched his name onto their banner by the entrance. 120,000 followers replayed his knockouts in slow motion and called him the future of Canadian boxing. Nolan agreed with them, publicly, often, and at volume. Behind Nolan stood his father, Clayton Prescott, whose oil field money had built half the commercial lots along Macleod Trail. Clayton wrote the single largest sponsorship check Apex had ever deposited. The gym's manager, Bryce Henning, framed a photo of that handshake on the office wall. Bryce had 2 priorities: keep the heavy bags oiled and keep the Prescotts happy. When Nolan's jokes turned mean, Bryce studied his clipboard until the room went quiet. People said Bryce wasn't a bad man, just a man whose spine bent toward whoever signed the checks. Tamara Voss worked the front counter and missed nothing. She liked Hector. He remembered every member's name. He left the break room cleaner than he found it. One Thursday evening, she watched a 12-year-old girl from the youth program throwing crosses at the wall mirror, all shoulders, chin high, feet tangled up like shoelaces. The girl had stayed late because her mother's bus ran behind schedule. The coaches had gone home. Nobody was watching. Nobody but the janitor. Hector passed with his mop cart and paused. He tapped the girl's back heel with the mop handle. Just a light touch. He shifted her lead shoulder forward half an inch with 2 fingers. He pressed her chin down with his thumb, gently, the way you'd close a music box. Then he walked on as though he'd done nothing more interesting than adjust a thermostat. The girl reset and threw the same cross. It cracked the air so sharply Tamara flinched behind the counter. The girl stared at her own fist. Hector pushed his cart down the dim hallway, humming something slow and familiar, a hymn or a lullaby. Tamara couldn't tell. And for the first time, somebody at Apex asked the question that would unravel everything. Who taught the cleaning guy to rebuild a punch with 2 fingers? Saturday arrived loud. Nolan Prescott had just taken his 17th straight win, a 3rd-round stoppage across town at the Corral, and he returned to Apex with the belt slung over one shoulder and 40 members pressed around him. Phones appeared before his jacket came off. He replayed his knockout on the gym's wall-mounted screen twice, narrating both times. Then he got bored. Bored champions go hunting for amusement, and amusement was pushing a mop along the back wall. What happened next lasted 9 seconds. Every camera in the room caught it. Nolan strolled over, grinning at his entourage, and shoved the old man with both hands. Hector hit the ropes and stumbled sideways. His bucket tipped and gray water soaked his uniform shirt, his trousers, one side of his face. The gym erupted. "Relax, Gramps. Just having fun. Somebody get the old man a towel. Maybe a life jacket." Hector lay against the ropes for one long breath. Then he straightened, joint by joint, the way old men rise when dignity is the heaviest thing in the room. He did not look at Nolan. He righted the bucket, replaced the wet floor sign, and started mopping the same spot again in long, even arcs while 40 phones filmed his soaked back. Only one person wasn't laughing. The 12-year-old girl stood by the cubbies, gym bag on her shoulder, watching the man who had fixed her punch get treated like a prop. Hector caught her eyes for half a second. Then he looked away, because some things hurt worse than a wet shirt. By 9 that night, the clip owned the internet. Nolan posted it with a caption, "Mop Man meets the champ." 200,000 views before midnight. Strangers stitched it, maimed the old man's stumble, slow motion his face for laughs. In the comments, exactly 5 people asked if he was all right. Across the city, in a narrow house in Bowness, Hector Dufresne sat on the edge of his bed. His wet uniform hung over the shower rod. The leather satchel rested on his knees. For 16 years, the combination lock had stayed set 2 digits off, close enough to open with a flick, but never flicked. Tonight his thumb traced the brass clasp once, twice, and then slowly, for the first time since the funeral, Hector Dufresne aligned the numbers and opened the satchel. It held 3 things. A pair of hand wraps so worn the cotton had gone the color of old tea, shaped permanently to a pair of hands that no longer trained anyone. A photograph of 4 people standing under a banner that read Canadian National Championships, 3 young fighters, and 1 older man whose smile hadn't changed, only disappeared. And a small digital voice recorder, outdated by a decade, kept charged by a habit Hector never explained to anyone. He plugged it in every Sunday. He had never pressed play since the day he put it in the satchel. He looked at all 3 objects for a long time. He touched none of them. At 2 in the morning, he closed the clasp, scrambled the combination, and set the satchel back in the closet. Some things you carry so long they become architecture. Remove them and the house might fall. Nolan Prescott woke up famous. Not fight famous, internet famous, which is louder, hungrier, and far less interested in skill. Mop Man Meets the Champ crossed 2 million views in 4 days. His follower count jumped by 70,000. A protein brand messaged him with a deal. Nolan scrolled the numbers in bed, grinning, and learned the oldest lesson of the algorithm. Cruelty performs. His knockouts took 10 weeks of camp. The janitor clip took 9 seconds. So when his manager asked what content was next, Nolan didn't say a title fight. He said, "Give them a sequel." The sequels arrived all week. Monday, Hector found his supply cart wedged inside the sauna, handles too hot to grip. Tuesday, Someone poured an entire tub of chalk dust across the lobby floor he had just finished. Nolan filmed the old man kneeling in the white powder, wiping it with bare hands. Wednesday brought a new game. Nolan blocked the hallway and wouldn't move until Hector bowed. Show some respect to the champ, Gramps. Tradition. Hector bowed, small and slow, eyes on the floor. The camera loved it. The followers loved it more. Each clip ended the same way, Nolan's laughing face and a caption about knowing your place. Tamara took it to Bryce Henning twice. Twice Bryce studied his clipboard. Athletes blow off steam, he said. Hector hasn't filed a complaint. That part was true. Hector never complained. But Tamara had started doing something quiet at the front desk. Every night before the security system's auto-wipe, she copied the day's footage onto a portable hard drive she kept in her glove box. She didn't know why yet. She just knew somebody should. Thursday night, Hector sat in his truck in the Apex parking lot, too tired to turn the key. He took out the voice recorder from the satchel, one saved file. He had paid for a cloud backup for years just to keep that recording alive. His thumb found the button in the dark. "Hey, Dad. It's Rosie. We just passed Red Deer. Coach Dufresne and Champion Dufresne, that's gonna look unreal on the same trophy. Love you. Leave the porch light on? I'm bringing it home." A 19-year-old voice, bright as a Sunday. Hector listened twice. He did not cry. He had spent his crying in rooms this city never saw. He pressed save the way he always pressed save and drove home. By Friday, the numbers dipped. The internet was bored and Nolan could feel it like a temperature dropping in an empty rink. Pranks were appetizers. The audience wanted a main event. That night he posted a poll. Should the janitor fight me? 93% said yes. Nolan stared at the result with a heat behind his ribs he couldn't name. Somewhere beneath the grin, in a room of himself he never visited, a small voice wondered why an old man's calm bothered him this much. He muted it. Saturday afternoon, the gym was packed for open sparring. Nolan waited until the room was full. Then he killed the music. Everybody listen up, special event. He dragged a stool to the center of the ring and stood on it. Phone lights finding him like spotlights. Apex, put your hands together for the real star of my page. Mop man. Laughter rolled. 40 cameras turned to the back wall where Hector stood with his cart, gray water going still in the bucket. Tamara at the desk quietly adjusted security camera 4. Nolan hopped down and crossed the floor. Oops, did I bump you, Gramps? My bad. The shove was lighter this time, staged for the lens. Hector steadied his cart. The bucket's heavy, son. Watch where you step. Heavy? Hit me, old man. Free shot. Right here. I don't fight, sir. Course not. Mops don't swing back, do they? Please let me finish my work. Get in the ring. 60 seconds with me, or get on your knees and polish this belt. I'm 67 years old, son. Then you'll go down easy. Take a swing. I'll close my eyes. Phones pressed closer. Someone chanted fight. The chant caught. Nolan peeled $500 from a money clip and slapped it on the ring apron. 500 says you can't land one clean shot, old man. Keep your money. Buy yourself a good pillow. A pillow. What for? Because everyone hits the canvas eventually, son. Some just haven't met it yet. The gym went strangely quiet, the way rooms do when a script stops being followed. Nolan blinked, then laughed louder to fill the silence. Tomorrow, noon. Mop Man versus the champ. 60 seconds. Be here. The crowd roared back to life, and the moment became content again, safe and shareable. Bryce Henning appeared at the edge of the mats, glanced at the money on the apron, and walked back into his office. Tamara watched Hector push his cart toward the supply room. His hands were steady. His arcs stayed even. Only his jaw had changed, set like a door that had finally decided to close. In the supply room, Hector sat on an overturned crate between the bleach jugs and the spare mats. He took out his phone, the new one, the one with a calendar. Tomorrow's date stared back at him in small gray letters. June 21st. His chest tightened around a wound 16 years deep. June 21st was the day the RCMP officer had come to the door with his hat in his hands. The day a silver Civic never made it past Red Deer. Of every date Nolan Prescott could have chosen for his circus, he had picked the anniversary of Rosalie Dufresne's death. 60 seconds, the boy had said. Hector closed the calendar, leaned against the cinder block wall, and breathed. Sunday came up, pale and cool. Before the sun cleared the Rockies, Hector stood in Queen's Park Cemetery with 2 folding chairs and 1 cup of Tim Hortons coffee, double-double. He set a chair by each stone. Lucille Dufresne, beloved wife. Rosalie Dufresne, 19 forever. He drank half the coffee and poured the rest into the grass between them, the way Lucille used to split her morning cup with the garden. "They want me in the ring today, Lou," he told her stone. On her day. The wind moved through the birch trees. He turned to Rosalie's marker and sat for a long while. "I'm not going to hurt that boy," he said finally. "I'm going to introduce him to himself." From his truck, he made 1 phone call, a number he hadn't dialed in 7 years. It rang 3 times. "Gus, it's Coach." Silence. Then a breath that sounded like a man sitting down hard. "Coach Dufresne, my God." "Noon today, Apex Boxing Club. I need a witness." "A witness to what?" 60 seconds. Home. Hector opened the hall closet and took down a canvas duffel stiff with disuse. He folded his old robe into it, white, gone ivory with age. He left the hand wraps in the satchel. He would not wear a trainer's tools against a child. "Defense only," he told the empty hallway. Not one punch thrown. By 11:30, the parking lot was full, and the internet was hungry for a beating. It would get an education instead. Noon landed like a held breath. Inside Apex, 300 people pressed around the ring and thousands more streamed on Nolan's live feed, the viewer count climbing in the corner of his screen. Someone had printed a banner on a bed sheet. The Mop Man Challenge. Nolan bounced in his corner in a fresh satin robe, shadowboxing for the cameras. The $500 sat under a water bottle at the ring's edge. Bryce Henning stood where managers stand when they want to be visible but not accountable. At 12:01, the crowd parted, laughing, phones high. Hector Dufresne climbed through the ropes in an ivory robe, no gloves, hands bare. The laughter stuttered. Something about the way he moved confused the room. No shuffle now. Each step landed quiet and precise, weight pouring from foot to foot like water finding level. His hands hung loose at his sides, fingers slightly open, the way a pianist's hands rest before the first note. In the back row, a broad-shouldered man in a gray parka lowered his coffee and went very still. "Nice pajamas, Gramps," Nolan called, arms wide. "Steal those from the lost and found?" "They were a gift. From someone who believed in me. 60 seconds. Try to survive." 60 seconds, Hector agreed. "Try to listen." "Listen to what?" "You're breathing, son. It's about to get very loud." Bryce pushed forward as referee raised an awkward hand and dropped it. Somebody tapped a phone timer. 60 seconds began. Nolan came out fast, feinted a jab, and fired his trademark left hook, the one that had dropped 16 men. It hit nothing. Hector was simply not where the fist arrived. His head off the center line by 3 inches, no more, no less. The gym heard it before it understood it. The whisper of bare feet on canvas, the snap of Nolan's sleeve cutting empty air. A straight right whistled through the space where the old man's jaw had been a half-second earlier. An uppercut rose past a chin that had already tilted back politely, like a man letting a door swing past. Hector never blocked. Blocking is for people who arrive late. He turned, shifted, breathed, and the canvas beneath him made almost no sound at all. 20 seconds in, nobody in the building was laughing. Nolan's breathing got loud, exactly as promised. He swung harder, which made him slower, which made the air he hit feel heavier. In the live stream chat, the jokes died mid-keystroke. Someone typed, "Is this real?" Someone else typed, "The janitor is a ghost." The viewer count rolled past 90,000. Nolan heard none of it. All he heard was his own lungs and the soft, patient slide of 2 bare feet that refused to stay where he aimed. At 28 seconds, Nolan abandoned technique entirely and charged, both hands reaching, 210 pounds of humiliation looking for a collar. Hector dropped his center of gravity an inch, caught the incoming shoulder, and turned. Just turned. Nolan's own momentum did the rest, carrying him over a quiet hip and laying him flat on his back. The sound of the landing went through the ring floor like a dropped piano. 300 people inhaled at once. Nobody exhaled. Nolan stared at the ceiling, lungs empty, pride emptier. The old man stood over him, one hand open, offering to help him up. "Breathe, son. You're fine. The canvas caught you." Nolan slapped the hand away and scrambled up. The second fall came at 41 seconds. Nolan charged blind, all weight forward, fists swinging wide. Hector stepped off the line, guided the reaching arm past its target, and let the boy's own force write the ending. Nolan hit the canvas face first, slid a foot, and stopped at the base of his own tripod. His live stream camera looked down at him. 90,000 strangers looked with it. 10 seconds left. Nolan rose with something broken loose behind his eyes. He grabbed the metal water bottle from the ring apron and swung it at the old man's temple. The crowd screamed. Hector swayed inside the arc, trapped the swinging arm at the wrist, and turned his hip one final time. But this throw was different. Halfway through the rotation, Nolan's skull was aimed at the steel turnbuckle post. Hector's free hand shot out and cupped the back of the boy's neck. He pulled him in. He redirected the fall to the center of the canvas. He laid Nolan down like something worth keeping. The phone timer chimed. 60 seconds finished. Hector Dufresne had not thrown a single punch. He stood in the center of the ring, breathing the way men breathe in libraries, and bowed to the boy gasping at his feet. Then he picked up his canvas duffel, left the 500 untouched under the water bottle, and climbed through the ropes into a silence you could have framed on a wall. Nolan stayed down, staring at the lights. 60 seconds ago he had been a champion. Now he was a meme being born in real time, and somewhere in his chest beneath the rage lived a feeling he couldn't name yet. It felt almost like reverence. He buried it fast and reached for his anger instead. Anger was familiar. Anger had a father. At the edge of the crowd, the 12-year-old girl started clapping. Alone at first. Then the youth program joined. Then their parents. Then the room, a rolling thunder of palms that Nolan would hear in his sleep for months. The man in the gray parka did not clap. Gus Baudouin just watched the ivory robe disappear down the hallway and whispered to nobody, "He's still perfect." By 6 that evening, the internet had a new obsession. The full live stream, the slow-motion breakdowns, the freeze frame of an old hand cradling the neck of a boy who had swung steel at him. Boxing channels dissected his footwork by frame and returned with the same stunned verdict. This is not reflexes. This is mastery you cannot purchase. The clip crossed 6 million views before midnight under one question, repeated in 30 languages. Who is the janitor? 40 floors above downtown Calgary, Clayton Prescott watched his son slide across a canvas on a phone screen, face first, in front of the entire internet. He watched it twice. He did not call Nolan. He did not ask if the boy was hurt. He scrolled to a name his money kept on speed dial, a name that had buried lawsuits, rivals, and inconvenient truths with equal efficiency. Genevieve Whitmore answered on the second ring. "Counselor," Clayton said quietly. "I need you to destroy a janitor." Genevieve Whitmore did not accept cases. She accepted campaigns. Monday morning, she sat in Clayton Prescott's glass office on the 38th floor with the live stream playing on a wall monitor, watching an old man embarrass her newest retainer's son. She watched without expression, the way a radiologist examines a scan. Your son challenged him publicly. 300 witnesses. He swung a metal bottle. This is unwinnable on the footage as it stands. Clayton slid a folder across the desk. Then we don't fight the footage, he said. We replace it. The folder held the architecture of a lie. A medical report, real enough, documenting Nolan's sprained wrist and bruised vertebrae from 3 uncontrolled falls. A statement drafted and ready, in which Nolan remembered being cornered and threatened. And a strategy built on one simple truth about the internet. Nobody watches the whole video. We sue for assault and battery, Whitmore said, scanning the pages. Civil court. We argue the janitor is a trained fighter who concealed his background, provoked a young athlete, and injured him in front of minors. She looked up. I'll need the gym's cooperation. Clayton smiled. I own the gym's cooperation. Nolan sat through the meeting saying almost nothing, his arm in a sling he'd been instructed to wear everywhere. The sling was theater. His wrist ached, but it worked. What didn't work was sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the old man's palm catching his neck, soft as a prayer, pulling his skull away from the steel post. The man he was about to destroy had saved him mid-throw. Nolan knew it. The footage knew it. "Sign here," Whitmore said. Nolan picked up the pen. The new video dropped Wednesday. 90 seconds, expertly cut. Gone was the shove, the bet, the taunting, the swing of the water bottle. What remained was an old man in a strange ivory robe throwing a young athlete onto his neck 3 times while children watched from the front row. The caption wrote itself: "Hidden fighter assaults local champion." By Thursday, the local news ran it with a tilted headline. 67-year-old janitor with mysterious combat training injures rising boxer at community gym. The anchor used the word disturbing twice and concerning once. The comments turned like weather. The same internet that had crowned him Sunday burned him by Friday. Why was a trained fighter working around kids? What was he hiding? Who does the background checks at these places? 6 million views of the truth got buried under 30 million views of the lie. A man with no social media accounts cannot answer 30 million views. Hector didn't try. He drove to work at 4:45 Monday morning and found his key no longer fit the service door. Bryce Henning met him in the parking lot with an envelope and a speech he'd rehearsed badly. Insurance issue, Hector. Nothing personal. The board, liability, you understand. Hector looked at the envelope. 11 years folded into 2 weeks of severance. The Prescotts are also reviewing your pension eligibility, Bryce added, eyes on the pavement. Their lawyers found some paperwork questions, but it could all go away. He lowered his voice. They want a public apology on camera. Say you provoked the boy. Say you're sorry. Clayton makes the suit disappear. You keep your retirement. For a long moment, the only sound was a magpie arguing with itself on the power line. I mopped that floor 11 years, Hector said. Never missed a corner. You tell Mr. Prescott my knees don't bend that direction. He handed the envelope back unopened and walked to his truck. Bryce stood in the parking lot, holding 2 weeks of money like a man holding his own letter of resignation. Not everyone believed the new story. The 12-year-old's mother called the gym to defend him and reached voicemail. A handful of members posted the original live stream, highlighting the shove, the bet, the bottle. Their posts gathered hundreds of views against Whitmore's millions. Truth was present at the battle. It was just badly outnumbered. That afternoon, Bryce called Tamara into his office and closed the door. The lawsuit named the gym's security system. Whitmore's people want the footage retention policy enforced. 30-day auto-delete. Make sure the system is, compliant. Tamara understood perfectly. Sunday's wide-angle footage, the footage showing the shove, the bottle, the catch, was 11 days from a hearing and 1 click from gone. Of course, she said. That night, she sat in her car with the hard drive in her lap, hands shaking, and made 2 more copies. The summons arrived Saturday by registered mail. Prescott v. Dufresne. Damages sought $900,000. Hector read it twice at his kitchen table, set it down beside his pension statement and a stack of bills. The arithmetic was simple and merciless. Even winning would bankrupt him. Lawyers cost more than janitors earn. That night, he took out the voice recorder and held his thumb over the play button. For the first time in 16 years, he didn't press it. He was afraid of what he'd hear now. Not Rosalie's voice, his own failure underneath it. He set the recorder face down on the nightstand, turned off the lamp, and lay in the dark with his eyes wide open. The hearing was set for a Tuesday, 11 days out. Whitmore fed the press all week. An anonymous source said the janitor had a violent history. Another source questioned why no boxing club in Alberta had records of him. The narrative shaped itself into the form that money wanted. By Monday night, the man who had refused to throw a single punch was the most hated old man in Calgary. He was sitting at his kitchen table that Monday night, alone with cold coffee and the summons when headlights swept the window. Then a second pair, then a third. Car doors closed in the driveway. 1, 2, 3. Unhurried, Hector rose slowly. 67 years old, sued, fired, famous for all the wrong reasons. He had no idea who would come for him at 10 at night. The knock, when it came, was soft, almost respectful. He opened the door. 3 people stood on the porch in the June dark, and 16 years stood behind them. Gus Baudouin, shoulders filling the doorway, still built like the middleweight he'd been at 20. Daria Sampson, posture military straight, earlobes thickened from 2 decades of clinch work, silver medal pinned to her collar like she'd never taken it off. Owen Flett, tailored overcoat, gym chain logo stitched onto his cap, hands in his pockets but eyes nowhere near casual. Nobody spoke. Then Daria stepped forward and hugged the old man so hard the porch light shook. "You stopped answering letters, Coach," she said into his shoulder. "So we stopped writing. We drove instead." They sat in his kitchen until 2 in the morning. Gus had been at the challenge. He'd called the others the night the doctored video dropped. Hector tried twice to send them home. "This is my mess." Owen set his coffee down. "Coach, you taught us the first rule of the corner. Nobody fights alone." Hector looked at 3 faces he had built from nothing, and for once the old man ran out of arguments. Tuesday. The hearing room was small, but the story was not, so the hallway outside filled with cameras. Justice Marion Fawcett, a careful woman with reading glasses and no tolerance for theater, called the room to order. Clayton Prescott sat behind his lawyer like a man who had already read the ending. Nolan sat beside him in the sling, eyes down. Hector came alone in his church suit, hands folded, representing himself because he could afford nothing else. Genevieve Whitmore worked the room like a scalpel. She played the 90-second cut on a courtroom screen. She used the phrase concealed combat training 4 times. "Mr. Dufresne, what qualifications do you hold?" "I hold no qualifications, ma'am. What certifications have you carried?" "Certification fades when you stop practicing it. Answer the question." Level 3 boxing coach, 3 disciplines, trained fighters for 22 years. Murmurs. Whitmore turned to the bench. "A man with that background is a weapon, Your Honor. A weapon who worked beside children for 11 years without disclosure." Hector said nothing. Slow answers, short answers, the way truth comes when it isn't performing. Why did a boxing coach of that caliber spend 11 years pushing a mop, Mr. Dufresne? What were you hiding from? For the first time, the old man's hands tightened on the table. The room leaned in. Even Fawcett looked up. Hector opened his mouth, closed it. Some doors don't open in public. Whitmore smiled at the silence and let it do her work. No further questions. That was when the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Gus Baudouin walked up the aisle in a Team Canada jacket, and half the room recognized him before he reached the front. 3-time national middleweight champion, current head coach at the University of Calgary boxing program. He asked to be heard as a character witness. Justice Fawcett, curiosity overriding procedure, allowed it. Gus raised his right hand, took the oath, and looked at the press row. "My name is Gus Baudouin. The man you've been calling a hidden threat is Hector Dufresne. In our corner, we called him the Quiet Hand. He trained me from a 15-year-old nobody in Vanier to a national champion. He also trained Daria Sampson and Owen Flett." He paused. "Stand up, guys." 2 people rose in the gallery. The murmur became a roar that Fawcett had to gavel down. Daria Sampson, Pan American silver medal, 2 Commonwealth titles. Owen Flett, undefeated professional, now owner of 14 boxing gyms across 4 provinces. Whitmore was on her feet, objecting to relevance. Fawcett peered over her glasses. "Counselor, you spent 40 minutes arguing this man's training history." His training history just stood up. "Overruled." "You asked what he was hiding from," Gus said, voice dropping. "I'll tell you, because he never will. 16 years ago, Coach had a 4th fighter, the best of us, his daughter, Rosalie." Hector went very still. Rosalie was 19. She died in a crash on the highway south of Red Deer. Driving to the national championships her father had spent 10 years preparing her for. The room held its breath. Coach buried his girl on a Friday. He locked his wraps in a satchel. He never coached again. Gus looked at the old man, and his voice cracked on the next sentence. He didn't quit boxing because he was dangerous. He quit forgiving himself. There's a difference. At his table, Hector looked down at his open hands, the hands that had taped Rosalie's wrists before every tournament, the hands that had carried the casket. Nobody in that room had ever seen the old man cry, and they didn't now. But his shoulders dropped finally, like a man setting down a pack he'd carried up a very long mountain. The room went quiet in a way courtrooms almost never manage. A reporter in the second row pressed her sleeve to her eyes. Nolan stared at the old man's back, and the sling on his arm suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Then the second door opened. Tamara Voss came up the aisle holding a portable hard drive like it was made of crystal. She had quit Apex that morning by text message. Under oath, she told the court about the deletion order and the copies she had made. Fawcett ordered the footage played. The full Sunday, the shove that started it, the $500 slapped down, the taunts, the metal bottle swinging at a gray head, and then the frame the justice asked to see twice. The old man's palm catching the back of Nolan Prescott's neck, pulling him away from the turnbuckle post, laying him down on the soft canvas like something precious. When the lights came up, nobody spoke for 4 full seconds. On the screen, frozen, an old man held a boy's head an inch from ruin. Whitmore's 90-second story had just been beaten by its own missing footage. In the gallery, the 12-year-old's mother stood and said, "Loud enough for the record. That man is the only adult in that gym who ever looked out for my daughter." Fawcett let it stand. Whitmore asked for a recess. The justice gave her 10 minutes. It took 3. Whatever was said at the plaintiff's table was said through teeth. When the room reconvened, Genevieve Whitmore stood with a face like setting concrete. "Your Honor, my client moves to withdraw the complaint with prejudice." Fawcett removed her glasses. I imagined he might. She looked at Clayton Prescott for a long, unhurried moment. This court also imagines the Law Society will have questions about who edited that video. Withdrawal granted. The gavel came down like a clean throw. The room began to move, reporters racing for the hall, Clayton already hissing at Whitmore. Hector sat motionless, Daria's hand on his shoulder. 16 years of silence broken open in a single morning. And then, above the noise, a chair scraped. Nolan Prescott was on his feet. He pulled the sling over his head, dropped it on the table, and said 5 words nobody expected. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Fawcett could have refused. The case was withdrawn, the morning already historic. But she looked at the boy standing without his sling and nodded once. Nolan didn't go to the witness stand. He turned to face the gallery and the cameras he'd spent years feeding. "Everything Mr. Baudouin said is true. Everything Tamara showed you is true. I shoved him because he was a janitor, and I thought janitors were furniture." His voice broke, and he let it. "He never threw one punch at me. The third fall, I was going headfirst into the post. He caught me. The man I was trying to destroy caught me. He faced Hector last. I picked June 21st for the fight. I didn't know what that date was. Now I do, and I can't give it back." He bowed clumsy and unpracticed, the first honest bow of his life. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dufresne." Hector studied him for a long moment and said nothing. Some apologies need to season before they're answered. The consequences arrived like dominoes that had been waiting politely in line. Boxing Alberta reviewed the unedited footage and stripped Nolan's regional titles for conduct. The bottle alone ended the debate. His sponsors vanished by Friday. The protein brand released a statement using the word integrity 3 times. Clayton Prescott fared worse. The Law Society opened an inquiry into the doctored video. His partners, reading the weather, pulled out of 2 downtown developments. The Apex board, suddenly brave, voted Bryce Henning out before lunch on a Wednesday. He packed his framed handshake photo himself. Tamara Voss turned down 6 job offers from news stations and accepted one from a law office that did pro bono work for athletes. 2 weeks later, the Apex board called Hector Dufresne into the office that used to ignore him. They offered him the head coaching position, full salary, his name on the wall. Hector listened with his hands folded. "I'll take it," he said. "One condition. Tuesday and Thursday nights, the main ring belongs to the neighborhood. Free boxing classes for every kid who walks in, no fees, no tryouts." The board agreed before he finished the sentence. One more thing, Hector added. It has a name. The Rosalie Dufresne program. Nobody in the room argued with that. On the first night of the program, 28 children sat cross-legged on the canvas, the 12-year-old front and center. Hector walked in carrying the leather satchel and a small hammer. First, he drove a nail into the wall beside the ring entrance and hung a photograph face out where it would watch every class. A girl of 19 grinning under a tournament banner, forever about to win. Then Hector opened the satchel in front of everyone, lifted out the old hand wraps, and wound them around his knuckles with hands that did not shake. 16 years of silence ended in 2 quiet knots. First lesson, he told the kids, voice carrying to the corners the way it used to. The strongest thing you will ever learn inside these ropes is how to walk away from a fight. The second strongest is how to make sure you can. 28 heads nodded like it was gospel. In the back, leaning on the doorframe, Gus Bodwin grinned at Daria Sampson. The quiet hand was loud again. He was halfway through teaching slips when the gym door opened. Nolan Prescott stood there in plain gray sweats. No logo, no entourage, no camera. The room went still. The children knew his face. Everyone in Alberta knew his face. Nolan crossed to the edge of the ring, stopped at the ropes like a man at a border crossing, and bowed. Mr. Dufresne, teach me the right way. I'll start from nothing. Hector looked at him for a long, level moment. Then he pointed to the supply closet. Grab a mop first, he said. The floor teaches humility. Lesson 1 starts there. Nolan Prescott, former champion, 200,000 in sponsorships gone, walked to the closet and picked up a mop in front of 28 children. And here is the strange part. Nobody laughed. The boy who had filmed an old man falling now pushed a bucket in careful lines while the old man taught children how to stand. The internet would have called it content. The canvas called it justice. 6 months later, on a cold Tuesday night in December, the lights of Apex burned warm against the prairie dark. Through the front glass, you could see the main ring crowded with children, 55 of them now, in lines that started crooked in September and stood straight by Christmas. The Rosalie Dufresne program had a waiting list, then a second location. By spring, it would have 4 in 4 cities, each one opened by a phone call Hector never asked anyone to make. Gus taught Tuesdays in Calgary. Daria flew in monthly and taught defense, which she called the most honest skill on earth. Owen paid every bill and declined every interview. Nolan was there every night, easy to miss, which was new for him. He wore plain white like every beginner. He'd ask Boxing Alberta not to expedite his appeal. He swept the ring before class and mopped the floor after, in long, even arcs that never crossed their own path, because he had asked the old man to show him how. His followers dwindled to 1/10 of what they'd been. He never posted again. Once a reporter cornered him in the parking lot and asked if this was a redemption arc. Nolan thought about it. No, he said, it's just Tuesdays. Hector Dufresne still arrived at 4:45. Some habits are load-bearing. He still read the floor while he walked it, still folded his rags in perfect squares. But the photograph by the ring faced outward now, and he had started talking to it again. Small things, scores and stances. Which kid finally kept her chin down? On June 21st, the program held no classes. The ring stayed empty and the lights stayed on, one night a year, for a champion who never arrived. Nobody scheduled it. Everybody honored it. The 12-year-old, 13 now, earned her first stripe in November. When Hector tied it on, the girl whispered something only the two of them heard. Hector laughed, a real one, from the chest, the kind of laugh that sounds like a door opening after a long winter. Later, Tamara asked him what the girl had said. The old man smiled and kept mopping a floor he no longer had to mop. Some things are between a coach and her fighter. That answer was the whole story, if you were listening. Bryce Henning manages a storage facility on the south side of the city now. Clayton Prescott settled with the Law Society quietly, the way rich men do, but the towers stopped going up with his name on them. Power, it turns out, is also a floor. It only holds you while you respect it. People still stop Hector on the street and ask about the 60 seconds. They want to hear about the throws. He always tells them the same thing. The fight was never the point. For 11 years, a master mopped floors in silence and nobody asked his name. It took 60 seconds of violence to make the world curious about a man that 60 seconds of kindness would have revealed. Don't wait for the ring to find out who's standing next to you. So here's the question this story leaves behind. If you were Hector, standing in that puddle with 300 people laughing, would you have climbed through those ropes? Or would you have kept mopping? Tell us in the comments, because the answers say more about us than about him. If this story moved you, share it with someone who feels invisible at their job. They might need to hear that worth doesn't wear a uniform. And subscribe, because we tell a new one every week and the next one is already waiting. Real talk. The reason I told this story is my mother cleaned office buildings for 26 years, smartest woman I ever knew, and people walked past her like she was part of the furniture. Somewhere out there right now is a janitor, a dishwasher, a night shift nobody carrying a whole legend quietly. Be the person who asks their name.